Hi, this is Bobby Carlton from Lioness Magazine. I'm the editor-in-chief, and today I am so thrilled. A little bit of fangirl thing going on here. I am interviewing Shelly Bond, CEO of Off Register Press. Shelly, you are, in my opinion, living the dream. You have created a company to support your dream artistic projects, such as the absolutely freaking amazing Femme Magnifique.
Yes,
Front of
thank
the
you.
I
Wow.
love this thing. Okay, so this is 50 magnificent women who changed the world. The stories and the lives of amazing women you probably know, and some you don't, all wrapped up in gorgeous art and super sharp writing. So before we talk about this, I'd love it if you could tell me a little bit about your career and how you got to where you are today, your company's story.
Oh, wow. Well, listen, Bobby, that is the most effervescent, amazing introduction I've ever had in my entire life.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Wow. Well, it's so nice to be here. Um, the story of my company is an interesting one. I've been in the comic book industry for over 30 years. So that's a long time. Started out in indie comics and then worked for one of the big two. I worked for DC Vertigo for 20 years, working my way up the ladder. Then I worked in indie comics for a few years. I was doing an indie imprint for IDW Publishing called Black Crown, which was basically an indie record label for them, which was a lot of fun. Worked with my husband, Philip Bond, who is an incredible artist, whose work you actually saw in Femme Magnifique. He did the story about Sally Ride. So we can talk about him later. I basically married my favorite comic book artist. But again, more on that later. Offregister.press is our latest endeavor, and it's amazing. It's basically a his and her comics and arts lab. And it's a place for us to actually produce and show off our personal projects. And it's a true labor of love. I mean, life is too short not to wake up every morning and just have at it and just put your heart and soul into only the things you want to put your name on. And so that's what we do.
That's fantastic. I mean, one of those projects was this fantastic thing. And part of the reason that I was so impressed with, I mean, I'm a huge comic book fan to begin with, but I was particularly impressed with this because you were bringing to life these stories about women, some of whom I'd never heard of. And I felt like I understood their lives in only 3 pages. And so just, the stories and the pictures and, so many different styles. This is really amazing.
Well, it's pretty much what they call curation these days. Being a comic book editor for over 3 decades was always the greatest job that no one knows about. And I reveled in that, especially being a woman in comics. Being a comic book editor is being a Jill of all trades. It's not just one thing. You could say it's part copy editor, part traffic cop, part scheduling maven, part psychiatrist. You're dealing with lots of different freelance artists and writers. So, there's a lot of drama on and off the comic book page. But you really have to be you have to juggle a lot of plates, and you have to be tough. You have to be fearless in terms of the type of subject matter you want to tackle in your work. And I think with anthologies in comics, it's challenging because since you are a comics fan, you'll know anthology books have a bad rep. People are often reticent to take a chance on them because not every story is great. So people will always say, well, I like an anthology, but I'm only interested in 3 of the creators or 3 of the stories. So to me, that's the greatest challenge. Because when people say no, I say, I'm going to change your mind, even if I have to trick you into it.
So what was the inspiration for this anthology? How did this come about?
Well, Femme Magnifique came about basically because of the results of the 2016 presidential election. And, you know, I woke up in the middle of the night. My husband and I just came back from a trip to London, and we were all off kilter with the time difference because we live in LA. And the TV was on, and it was announced that Donald Trump won the presidency. And I thought I was having a fever dream. I thought it was a nightmare. I couldn't believe my eyes and ears. And I was just mostly gutted that it was a lost opportunity for a woman to run the White House. Because as you know, it's been challenging for women throughout history, but specifically in 2016 and the subsequent years that followed, it was as if we went back into the dark ages. So when I actually woke up the next morning after the election, I noticed on social media that so many of my friends and colleagues were angry. And there was just like vitriol all over the place, the negativity. And rightly so. I mean, I think a lot of people were complaining for many different reasons. And I thought, God, we've got to do something about this. And so I started herding cats. I basically reached out to 2 of my friends who had put together a book on how to color comic books. They had done a Kickstarter a number of years earlier, and they asked me to write an introduction to it. So they were my first line of defense. I reached out to them and I said, hey, look, I never Kickstarted, but I want to put together an anthology that empowers women, because I am pissed off that we lost the election and we do not have a woman in the White House. And so they were into it. So Brian and Christy Miller of Hi-Fi Color Design actually agreed to help me assemble the book and produce it. And they both were pretty skilled in the Kickstarting process, which was very new to me. So I said, look, you guys handle that side of it. I will get all the creators. And like any good anthology project, it's really good to have a theme. So I pretty much came up with, you know, what I thought were fairly loose parameters. I said, look, we're going to do 50 women, and I'm going to make sure that we hire just feminists. So I didn't want to discount men in the industry, but I really wanted to go out of my way to invite lots of women to participate and people from all around the world. Because like in so many industries, you'll meet people in comics who say they're very big fans of diversity and being inclusive, but the proof is not in print. And so if there's one thing I like to do, it's put my money where my mouth is. And so I went out of my way to find some young up-and-comers, like a lot of young British talent on the scene at that time. And I just reached out to people and asked if they wanted to pitch me story ideas. So basically the parameters were fairly loose. I said I wanted people to pick one person, one woman who changed their lives in some way. And that person had to be involved in either pop, politics, or arts and the art and sciences. And I started reaching out to friends and people who owed me favors, some famous people like Gail Simone and Kelly C. DeConnick, and roped in my husband, who, as I said, my favorite comic book artist. So naturally, I wanted him to draw a story. And it was an opportunity actually to meet people from different fields. And one of my favorite stories was the story about Cindy Whitehead, which Jim Rugg pitched to me, which you had pointed out. I used that story in the back of the book to show process. But Cindy has become a great friend. And she was hands down one of the most exciting and intelligent and coolest people to work with. So much so that I had her write the introduction, as you probably noticed.
Yeah, actually, looking at the back of the book was fascinating to me because it did go into the process. And, as a words oriented person myself, I love seeing like literally proofreaders notes and editing notes and things like that in the Cindy Whitehead story. Just so everybody who may not be aware, she's a very famous professional skateboarder. And the story about her life and how she really got into this is fascinating. Again, told in only 3 pages, words and pictures. It really just comes together. You must like leaf through this sometimes just to inspire yourself.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
how I feel.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the parts of the initial brief that I gave people was that I really wanted it to just be part biopic, but mostly a personal story, the personal connection that the writer had with this femme magnifique, this person they were saluting. And I was absolutely insistent that people picked only women that were important to them in their lives. I didn't assign anyone to any person. And the strange thing about that was you would imagine there would be some overlap. And there was really only one. There was only one time where I had to say to someone, someone else picked that person already. You have to pick your second choice. But I found that to be really interesting because, you would think that we share similar role models and similar women in history or around us who inspire, but not so. Everybody had a very interesting and varied choice in their femme magnifique.
So you mentioned earlier that you use Kickstarter to fund this, and it seems like you've had a lot of success using Kickstarter to fund your projects. If someone was thinking about going that same route, what would you tell them? Any tips you can share?
Absolutely. Listen, kickstarting a campaign is like running for office. So the campaign lasts usually 30 days, and every part of your time on those 30 days is devoted to raising money, to crowdfunding. So before you go into it, read the fine print. I always recommend going to the Kickstarter website. Something else that is really fun that I recommend can be found in my second Kickstarter, which was called Hey Amateur, which was a book about how to do anything in 9 panels. So we took the traditional comic book grid, which you're familiar with as a big X-Men fan, which, by the way, I salute you and love that about you. I just discovered that today, and I think that's so badass. But in Hey Amateur, I did an afterword, and it was called How to Kickstart a Successful Campaign. So I will make that available to your listeners and your fans so that they can read my contribution to the book that I edited and curated, Hey Amateur.
Nice.
But there are lots of tips. What I have to say most of all is you have to really know, you have to understand that it's going to take over your life for 30 days. You have to be prepared and get a lot of your graphics and a lot of your copy and a lot of your sales tools, your media sales pieces prepared in advance. Because the more you can do before you launch, the better your campaign's going to be. But it's interactive, it's fun, and the idea is to get other people involved. So pick a project that you love, that you know that you're not going to mind living for 30 days, because that's what you'll be doing. You'll be pounding the pavement and you'll be selling your story or your product nonstop.
Nice. So you're working on a new project that is just going live on Kickstarter. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. And in fact, I'd like to just bounce it back to you and say, you are a part of this project. It's called Heavy Rotation. And it's basically a love letter to 80s college radio, because that's what brought us together. We were both DJs at our college radio station.
People are going to know how old I am. No.
But I like the fact that you're a little bit older than me, actually. I'm usually the oldest one in the room. So that's another reason why I like you so much.
Yep. Keep you from being the oldest person in the room. Good job,
I,
Bobby.
yeah.
So heavy rotation, college radio, love letter. So it's going live. What can people expect when they go to that Kickstarter page?
Okay. Well, first of all, what's really cool about heavy rotation is that it's a comic book anthology. It's 48 pages, and it's a combination of short comic book stories, single illustration and prose, games. There's a Tales from the Listener line, 2-page sort of like Q&A section. There's going to be a lot of fun articles, and it's going to be not only stories of the DJs, a whole group of us that lived for our radio shifts, but it's also going to be a little bit about the history of college radio. And it's going to be part how-to, so people that maybe always wanted to know, like, what does a college DJ actually do? Like, it was not the Wild West. Like, I kind of went into it thinking like, oh, I'm going to play all Bowie albums for an hour because I can. Well, no, you cannot. I basically learned there were rules. There was a dot system. And if you didn't adhere to the rules, you got in big trouble.
There was definitely rules. I remember rules.
The other thing that I'll tell your listeners, which is cool, a lot of the Kickstarter projects, they're expensive. You know, it costs a lot of money to make a book like Femme Magnifique. Like, you know, you held it up. We had a lot of creators in this book. It's a very shiny, beautiful object. When you are kickstarting a periodical, it's a much smaller endeavor. So we were able to make so many of the rewards on Kickstarter inexpensive. So if you pledge $1, you'll get a postcard, and it will be a great pleasure for me to send you a postcard, and you will get a postcard image. If you want a PDF of the comic book, that's awesome. That's only $3. So, hey, you know, it's like the price of a cappuccino. And like, how much caffeine do you really need right now? $3 for the PDF. The comic itself is $8. Now that's actually, comparatively speaking, an average price for a comic book. So like, the bonus is that you get to follow along as we make this thing. So I will take you behind the scenes and show you how it's done. And let me tell you something, as someone who has edited comic books for 30 years, who is a self-taught letterer and a frustrated art director, I will love nothing more than to show you the ins and outs of putting together everything you see on the page, from like the logo design, the spine, the beautiful end papers. Like, if you get involved with heavy rotation, it will be like a crash course in like how it's done, how we actually put together what you see on the page in beautiful 4-color. We also, I must say, we have a sticker swag bag. So if you like pins, I don't go anywhere without wearing a pin. We will be making little badges with really cool imagery on them. We will have vinyl stickers, and we will have postcards. The swag bag is $12. We've got a deal where if you buy the comic book and the swag bag, you actually save $3. So they're all different levels if you want to pledge. And if you aren't into comic books and you don't have a computer and you don't like postcards, you can send us money anyway, just because you believe in the project. So you can back us, you can just give us bonus support, or you can actually just share the campaign, help us on social media by spreading the word. It must be said, because we haven't talked about music, it's a love letter to the 80s, and we are going to do our best to cover our ground here. I have my favorite bands. I mean, I'm wearing a Clash pin. I'm sitting next to like the world's coolest Clash pillow because Joe Strummer is God to me. I cannot tell you how many cool bands we are going to be saluting in this book. I will name drop right now, and Bobby, chime in if there's someone who you also worship. But if you like bands like New Order, Joy Division, The Jam, Depeche Mode, OMD, this is a book for you.
REM.
REM, Roxy Music.
Who I first discovered in college.
Okay. And so many other cool musical groups, genres of music. I mean, we are going to definitely go through punk and new wave. Post-punk, I'm a huge fan of Gang of Four. Love the whole industrial phase. Synth pop, new romantic, new wave. The list goes on and on. Anything that was defined as new music or indie alternative, that's the vibe.
Nice. So this is your life for the next 30 days. Then what happens?
After the next 30 days, we will be combat boots to the ground, making the comic book. So while we're doing the campaign, we have a $3,000 target goal. Once we raise $3,000, we're making the comic book. So being a positive thinker, I'm a half glass full kind of person. We've already started creating the book. So for instance, we have 3 stories completely finished. So we will continue to make them. So while we're funding the campaign, behind the scenes, I'm going to be asking people like you, Bobby, I am going to be asking you to start writing your comic book scripts. And I'm going to pair you up with a really incredible artist. And we're going to start actually building the book. One of the great things about having a company like Off Register is that we do it all. We not only wrangle the people, enforce the deadlines, letter the pages, hire the artists, edit the pages, but I'm going to be designing and producing and assembling this book on the computer. So, we take it through from beginning to end. So it's going to be exciting. And it's something I love to do on my Kickstarters, is to show people footage, whether it's photos or even video clips, which I hope we're going to do, of the campaign in motion and of the artwork in progress. So it's super exciting.
Great. That is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. But before I let you go, can you give perhaps a little bit of advice to other people who are interested in taking their passions and turning them into their livelihoods?
I have 2 words for you. Be fearless. You can't let anyone or anything get in your way. Just go with your gut. And I live by the comic book imperative, the forward imperative of motion. Just stay focused. Don't bother looking around you or behind you. Just be fearless.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.